What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Freedom to Flourish podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Tim Augustiniak, here with a good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Joel Miller,
Good
and
morning.
we have a great episode for you today. I actually received a text from Dr. Joel last night that said, tomorrow, podcast tomorrow, note is ready to go. And that was just music to my ears because it meant that we got here this morning and we were ready to go. And that you can share with the audience, Dr. Joel, how often does that ever happen?
It doesn't happen too often. I think partly because we're so busy with patients and then personal lives and all the things. And so, we talk about this quite a lot, off camera and stuff, just how busy we can be with the office and patients and, trying to help as many people as possible and trying to provide the best care as possible, but then also going home and actually having a life and having family and all the things. So when we get to the podcast, it's like, man, if we can set aside some kind of time to do this every week, awesome. And if we can just jump in as efficiently as possible, awesome. So yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
We could probably dedicate a little bit more time, but I think our episodes are all right regardless.
Yeah. Yep.
But today's episode is going to be really good. So I had titled it on here, Why Functional Medicine Doesn't Work. And I think our listeners are going to think that's kind of interesting. But would you elaborate for them as to really what we kind of mean with that and what we're going to be getting into?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are so many times where people will call in or even just talking to people and, they've tried the natural route with things. They've tried to address their health issues through, some people say natural medicine, some people say holistic medicine, some people say the natural route. And then, of course, a big term is functional medicine. And so this got me thinking, as to why some approaches don't work. Why does this holistic approach for some people not work sometimes? Why does this functional medicine approach not work for people sometimes? And so, in thinking about that, it occurred to me, Dr. Tim, that the things that we're going to talk about today, like if you've seen a holistic doctor and you haven't seen healing, you haven't seen good results, you haven't seen good improvement with things, I would say you can break it down into reasons why, and that's what we're going to do in this episode. But these reasons, Dr. Tim, as I was thinking about it, it wasn't just me saying, oh my goodness, look over there, that doctor wasn't able to help, let me nitpick why. No, it was also an inner self-reflection, self-evaluation, and just thinking these topics that we're going to talk about, these are things that every good doctor should be self-evaluating on. Okay, so for our listener, here's kind of the breakdown. Why does functional medicine not work sometimes for people? I would say number one, a lot of times it starts with, did you actually get to the root issue? Number two, I would say, and this is going to sound super simple, but did you actually address the root issue correctly? And there's a lot of different subpoints in that we'll get into. And then number three, I'll add in the patient, yourself, were you compliant? And another big question is, were you are you ready to heal? That's a huge question as well. That kind of jumps into how our body needs to be or our mind needs to be in alignment with our body and things like that. So we get that stuff all the time, and we just kind of wanted to jump into it because this may help people that maybe haven't had the greatest experience with holistic healthcare. We want to jump into it for people that just haven't gotten the results that they were looking for. And we want to break down, yes, why that might have been, but also just holistic doctors, kind of ourselves, we want to kind of also explain hey, these are the things that we are always thinking through with cases, with each patient if someone is not getting better. So, Dr. Tim, anything to add to that? Dr. Tim, you mentioned something just off camera before that I would love for our listeners to hear. And that was just kind of about what is functional medicine? Can you just kind of jump into that just a second? And then we can get into some of these, logistics as to why functional medicine doesn't work sometimes for people.
Yeah. So one other thing that I'd like to get to that I threw on our note here. One big thing that I think that keeps people from getting better is they are trying to be their own doctor, and they are trying to kind of compile a lot of different things together from numerous doctors, as well as what they're trying to do with Dr. Google. And it just doesn't end up being a conducive path forward with care. So we'll get into that. I'm sure you've dealt with that quite a bit, but
I have. That's great. Yeah.
As far as it goes for people who, well, I guess in general, functional medicine, why,
Yep.
or what it is and how it works and everything. Some people think of functional medicine as this, I guess, actual, style of care, I would suppose, but it's not like you're a trained medical doctor where you have your things that you abide by during medical school that everybody does the same, everybody documents the same, and it's all pretty much continuous, the same procedures with everything. Functional medicine is more so a framework of thought behind care. And so all it is basically assigning organ systems and underlying root causes based off of signs and symptoms and what could be feeding into problems rooted in things like immunology, biochemistry, and basically all those things. Understanding how the body works and what things will cause problems, what sort of deficiencies, what sort of things will deplete those resources, all of those things. And then from there, the path forward is quite a bit different depending on who you talk to. So there's a lot of docs that are strict, IFM, Institute of Functional Medicine, you order all of these labs, you do all of these things, you do all these supplements, and it ends up being a really extensive thing. I personally, when somebody calls and asks if I did functional medicine training through IFM, I don't often find that for my office, they end up being a great patient. Because with that comes a lot of times prior experience with doctors who do extensive labs. They do extensive protocols. I hate the word protocol. That is probably one of my least favorite words that I think that anybody can use within the functional medicine realm, because all that tells me is you don't know how to modulate your treatment plan depending on what is going on currently with your patient.
Yeah.
There is no protocol that I think anybody should be following to fix their gut. There is no protocol that, quite honestly, in my opinion, truly fixes just about anything. You need to be very, very, very specific. And that's where I think that using biofeedback mechanisms to help treat your patients along with the functional medicine process and knowledge is the best foot forward that you can use. However, I have had people that come in and say, yeah, I went to a functional medicine doctor previously, and all he did was acupuncture on me. And it was just needling, which I would argue that that's not necessarily functional medicine. I mean, I suppose you could rationalize that, hey, maybe you thought, okay, well, this is definitely a liver detox issue and an adrenal issue, all of these things, for hormones or whatever, and then doing treatment for those organs using acupuncture potentially. But within functional medicine, I think it's a pretty common understanding that there's basically the drivers of inflammation or drivers of problems that you need to eliminate. And then from there, you need to rebuild and replenish resources. So basically, get rid of bad things, replenish the good things, the bad things end up draining. It kind of boils down to being as simple as that. And if that's the case, I personally do not see acupuncture as replenishing anything the body requires. You can have all your chi and all of your organs and all of the things aligned, all your meridians functioning well, but if your body simply lacks resources to do its job, it's just not going to do it. And I think that a lot of what functional medicine operates on is basically deficiencies as a result of inflammation, stress, metabolic issues, all of those things. And so you kind of have to supplement things and change up the diet a little bit. So if it's just a musculoskeletal or just a physical myofascial mechanoreceptive treatment, I would argue that that's not going to do as much. But on the flip side, I think if you solely rely on labs and nutrition, you're not going to get anywhere either, because you need to have some kind of blend of some sort of biofeedback mechanism to investigate the body and see what's going on. Because I mean, at least with like legitimate acupuncturists, they'll take a stethoscope and they'll listen to your pulse points and they'll listen to see, which one's thrown off and which organ is irritated, to then target their treatment. So there is some biofeedback with that. I mean, like ourselves, using applied kinesiology, a lot of people will use different frequency, techniques and everything to assess what's going on internally. All of those things, in my opinion, are super necessary to provide us a decent path forward, because you can have all these suspicions, all these ideas about things, but oftentimes when I have somebody who says, hey, they have a hormone detox issue or some sort of hormone issue, that when they come in, their labs will show that they're fine, that their hormones are okay. But then we start testing things and I say, okay, well, your body's struggling to detoxify this. And they go, well, how? My labs show that it's okay. Well, your body is showing me with the neurology that it's irritated, and it's just it doesn't have enough resources to do things efficiently. And therefore it's showing it's provoking your nervous system, your adrenals, all those things. Labs don't tell you that. Labs completely neglect the nervous system. And I would argue there's like no good testing to assess the nervous system, period.
Yeah.
That's why POTS is becoming this more and more common thing that people are having problems with. And it's because it's an autonomic nervous system issue, and there's no way to measure that. So anyway, so my whole take on functional medicine is it is a thought process, and then the path forward that you use to take that knowledge of the underlying causes of inflammation, stress, deficiencies, all of those things, that is where you must have something in addition to functional medicine training and knowledge to find that proper path forward. Because if you don't, it ends up being a ton of labs that can get really expensive. And with those labs being expensive, at least you'd think, okay, well, if I'm spending a lot of money, then hopefully it'll be really worth it and it'll give me a good path forward. They don't. And so that's where you have to do something else, because it's an expensive guessing game, and then it's a ton of supplements that aren't specific to you. And that's why it all ends up being protocol based. It's just this long-term, hey, give it 4 to 6 months. We'll see how you do, yada, yada. And it's like, why should you need 4 to 6 months?
Yeah.
That's my question. So,
yeah, no, that's great. That is, I wish every person could understand that, Dr. Tim, that what you're saying here, that the functional medicine approach, it's a thought process. It's a way of thinking. Number one, like understanding how the body is actually designed and how it functions beautifully. They say there's 11 body systems, right? That's what we learned in school. You have the musculoskeletal system, the cardiovascular, all these things. It's one big system, and how it works together is such a beautiful thing for doctors to kind of figure out. And that's one of my pet peeves. Your pet peeve you mentioned is protocol. I also, very much find that to be a little bit funny, but my another big pet peeve for me is all these different specialist doctors. Like if you have a gut issue, you go to the GI specialist. You have a thyroid issue, you go to the endocrinologist. But in reality, if you want to have an optimal thyroid health, you have to understand how the gut functions, and you have to be able to address those issues as well. And so it's like, it's just a silly thing. And I think that's why patients tend to they just go through so many different doctors, and they just get referred and referred and referred. And it's a little bit silly in the sense that in our allopathic medical system, you have all these different areas and avenues, but we need somebody that's actually putting it all together, because the body functions all together. And so one of my little pet peeves and side tangents.
You wanna hear another pet peeve that I have that you maybe think of? I guess this is the pet peeve episode. My newest pet peeve is medical doctors who are not endocrinologists prescribing thyroid hormone.
Okay.
Because the amount of people that come into my office that should not be on that stuff or don't have a legitimate thyroid issue and they get prescribed medication makes me want to do bad things, to say the least. It just drives me up a freaking wall, man. It's terrible. It really drives me up a wall, because it's like they have very little understanding of what really goes on with it, and they see the thyroid is off just a little bit. They're like, okay, well, take this, and then it's just a gotcha, because people go, ooh, I've got this thyroid problem, and they never get resolution. They just keep continuing to refill the prescription. And, you'll see them 7, 8, 9, 10, however many years later. And they're like, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. My doc back then just said my thyroid was off, so I needed to take this. And it's like, it just raises a red flag to me, because why are people not thinking, why do I need to take this medication forever? That's the part that gets me, is it's playing on the ignorance of people, which, I mean, if you're just a regular Joe and you're not in the an average Joe, a regular Joe, that's not a thing. But if you're just an average Joe and you're just going to your medical doctor that you trust and they say, hey, you need to be taking this, most people just listen because you're supposed to be able to trust them. And I just feel like that's kind of blatant negligence at that point, just for the sake of getting somebody on a long-term medication that they'll, in their eyes, probably ideally never get off, because I'm sure they get kickbacks for those scripts. So anyway,
it's hard to, right, from our perspective, to know the motive of another doctor, because I know a lot of doctors have really good motives, but and there's some that don't, and that can be hard to see, of course.
Correct. I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, I think that most doctors have the best, I guess, motives with patients and everything, but I feel like if there's not an end in sight with something, and there isn't the knowledge to help somebody truly heal a problem, I feel like not continuing to educate yourself to figure that out further is negligent.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really it's not in the best interest of our patients. And that might be a very aggressive thing to say, I suppose, but nothing. My biggest battle, I think, that I deal with day to day is how terrible I feel when people don't get better. And I'm always trying to challenge myself to improve on my skills and my knowledge to help people get better, because it really does bug me. Like I don't do this because I want people to keep coming to see me. It'd be great if I could scare people into coming in all the time, and then if I had no morals, I'd be super rich. But unfortunately, I don't do this because I just want to make money. I do this because I really want to help people. And I feel like you have to always be willing to learn and try to figure out, well, how can I get somebody away from this? Even with supplements, some people, they always have to take certain things. And I'm like, why is this the case? And that's a lot less severe than thyroid hormone, I would say. But I'm raising that question, and it makes me wonder why these docs are not raising those questions in their practice. And maybe they are. Maybe they're having a battle with it, but maybe they're too far in their career. They're like, I just can't reinvent myself at this point. I don't know. I would like to think everybody has the best interest, but it does kind of bug me, because then it's a lot of docs that don't necessarily understand enough. And therefore they're just giving people things because they were told that's what you give people if the labs say this.
Yeah. When we took the was it the Hippocratic Oath, when we started school and when we graduated school, to do no harm and that kind of thing, there's a component of responsibility in that as healthcare providers, where our job is to do the best that we can. And if we don't know something, it's our responsibility to go learn it, to be able to help the person in front of us. We are the advocate for people and their health. We are professional health advocates in that way. And I think that falls on every single health professional.
It's crazy. So we still, this is totally off track, but we had to recite that and everything, basically do no harm and all that stuff. So everybody thinks of Harvard as like the school, the most prestigious of institutions in the United States. Their incoming medical students these days are not required to recite the Hippocratic Oath.
Whoa.
They have been recently reciting their own personalized oath that they come up with, because the Hippocratic Oath has been abandoned.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just Googled that again just to make sure that I was not going to misspeak there. But it's a thing. It's a thing that one of the most prestigious institutions in the entire world is now encouraging their medical students to craft their own oath, as opposed to the, I guess, standard that says do no harm. And I mean, I would argue that it's probably because there's a lot of harm that ends up happening with medicine these days, just negligence and all those things because of medications, and unfortunately a lot of money that gets involved with stuff. But
yeah. All right.
Let's get back.
The last thing, and then we'll start our episode here. The last thing I'll say is, when it comes to functional medicine, one of the frustrating things is that if you research like around like different doctors and stuff, functional medicine, that phrase is on like every doctor's websites these days. It's such a hot topic, hot phrase. And I literally had some patients that started, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks ago, and they And one of the questions I always ask people on their first visit is like, hey, how'd you hear about us? And they said they found us online, and they researched a ton, and they ended up scheduling with us. But they said one of the reasons why they ended up going with coming here for care rather than other practices was because in all these other practices, it would say functional medicine, get to the root cause. And then like all the reviews talked about how great Ozempic was. All the things just pointed back to Ozempic, and they were like, we didn't see that on yours at all. So we just wanted a place that wasn't going to say natural, but then go with like Ozempic. And I was like, holy smokes, like that's pretty wild out there. But anyway.
Those things are getting more and more popular.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for it to be like when we're like, 70 and you get the commercials that say you're entitled to compensation if you took tirzepatide, Mounjaro, all these things, and you have this necrotizing bone disease or something, severe lack of motility or whatever going on with your gut. You get whatever payout or whatever. I'm just waiting for something like that. I encourage people not to do it because we just don't know enough about it yet. But
yeah, I think some of that actually is starting to come out. I've seen some things where they're talking about a lot of crazy side effects. All right, Dr. Tim, let's jump in. Reasons here. Number one, why functional medicine doesn't work. The doctor did not discover the root cause. Dr. Tim, one of the things that we find, I'll break this down a little bit, and then if you want to add to it, great. Otherwise, we got plenty more to go through here. But getting to the bottom of the issue is one of the most important things. And here's the issue I see. A lot of docs, a lot of practitioners will talk about this, but then when it actually comes to their systems are not that great. So what do I mean by that? Well, you can talk about getting to the root problem, but if you don't actually spend enough time talking to the patient in the appointment, then how are you going to know? How are you going to know all the details? How are you going to know when this issue started? How are you going to know what makes it worse, what makes it better, how it's going now? How are you going to know the other systems that are also going on with their health that could be impacting things? And the only way to do that is you need time. Let's say you do spend time and you go through things. Well, now the next thing is, do you understand how the body works to where you can be able to pinpoint? It's like so many people have issues with energy, and what's the first recommendation? Well, let's check iron, and if your iron's off, let's prescribe iron. Well, I find a lot of times, number one, iron can contribute to fatigue, but most of the time if someone has low iron, they usually have infections that tend to be feeding on the iron. And so it's just one of those things where we need to understand how the body functions, and we need to understand what causes problems. And then next I would say is actually testing. Like, how do you find exactly what it is? Well, you can do all kinds of stool tests. You can do heavy metal tests, mold toxicity tests, all these things. And those things are not inherently bad. Like compared to the mainstream healthcare model where we don't really do, like medical doctors don't really do much testing at all to get to the bottom of things. Then the testing, with holistic practitioners is amazing. But of course, what we jump into, Dr. Tim, is the muscle testing in the applied kinesiology to test the different reflexes and neurology with the body, and then be able to figure out and tell exactly what's going on with the nervous system. But I find doctors don't spend enough time with their patients a lot of times, and that leads to issues. If they do, they need to understand how the body functions and what can cause what. And that's just a knowledge and kind of experience thing, I think. But then it's like, okay, well, what tests do you run to figure out what's going on? And I find that if there's any kind of deficiency in any of those areas, then it's just really hard to be able to specifically pinpoint exactly what's going on. And that's the same mindset I take to patients every day is, am I spending enough time to actually ask the right questions and understand what's happening? Do I know from what they're telling me, can I point myself in the right direction as to where we need to go next? And if not, man, I need to be researching and studying after this to figure out exactly what needs to happen. And then the last part is, how do we actually get to the bottom of things? Do we need to do labs? Sometimes we do. A lot of times, though, we can jump into the muscle testing and get to the bottom of things rather quickly. So that's why reason number one why functional medicine may not work is, did we actually discover the root cause? Dr. Tim, anything to add to that? And then next we need to go through here, actually addressing the root cause correctly.
Correct. So with identifying the root cause, I think a really good way to summarize things, and something that people could kind of hopefully have ringing in their ears, is just because something is present on your labs does not mean that that is causing your symptoms.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So with all of the protocol-based stuff and I'll call it a traditional functional medicine approach with nothing but labs and everything, you can easily spend thousands of dollars on labs in the beginning, and it might show that you have some things going on, but that does not mean that those are the reasons for your symptoms. Everything plays together, of course. And oftentimes I would argue that there are numerous root causes where metabolic disease leads you to be susceptible to immune system things to get thrown out of whack. Therefore, you become hyperreactive to foods, microbiome, infections, all those things. And then it's just this whole cascade of metabolic issues and stress causing your immune system to be worse, and your immune system making you more susceptible to those other things. And it's this vicious cycle. And so you have to deal with it from a couple different standpoints. Like you said previously, dietary changes, lifestyle changes, supplements, replenishing nutrients, all of the things. So kind of have to go through it a couple different ways. But yeah, the next step with things. So didn't address the root cause correctly, or how do you address the root cause correctly? So, it just goes back to truly identifying what the root cause is. And nothing's perfect. I'll be the first to admit, even with the biofeedback mechanisms that we use with the systems healthcare technique, sometimes you're not on the mark, and it is frustrating as all get out. But at the very least, it's not like there's these labs that you're doing that could mean absolutely nothing and not at all be tied into your symptoms. At least with what we're doing, we're at the very least improving nervous system health, improving immune system health as a whole. And it's not just these rabbit holes of things that might just be secondary that your immune system or everything is not really reacting to. And so with addressing things properly, back to protocols, everybody is specific. If your doc is recommending that you do some protocol to fix something, chances are they are not being very specific to what you have going on. And they might think that, okay, well, we did labs and we found this, and then therefore we have our protocol for this. It's not specific. I've got, for those who are maybe watching our video, I've got a couple shelves right behind me, always as the backdrop on the podcast here. And I have, what would you say that looks like? Maybe 50 bottles at bare minimum, maybe of different supplements, herbs, nutrients, things like that I have on my shelf. And then I have a bunch more on the countertop that you can't see behind me. Mm-hmm. All of those things could be helpful for somebody's problem. So if you've got, 100 different options for something, how are you going to know what you need? Especially with like a microbiome imbalance, for example. There's probably 30, would you say probably 30 options of different herbs that either of us carry that can help kill off microbiome and balance the immune system and get things regulated in the gut? Yeah. What protocol is going to say, oh, do all 30 of these herbs, you know? And even if you do all 30 and it's like a blend and it's a low dose of each, it's probably not going to be enough of anything to actually do anything to ramp up the immune system to balance things. Yeah. And so finding the true root cause to figure out what you need to address. And then from there, very specifically identifying actual potent nutrients to do the thing to solve a problem. That's why, we always say, most people, it's like 6 weeks or so max. Usually people are doing pretty dang good. And it's because we are able to absolutely personally identify the exact nutrients that their body requires to fix each problem that we come up with. And once they do that, they should see a pretty decent change and then move on to the next thing and on to the next thing. And then a couple weeks later, it's like once you get through, 3 or 4 roadblocks and different steps with things are feeling really good, and the immune system's pretty balanced. The adrenals are balanced. Everything feels pretty dang good. And it's got to be specific with some sort of biofeedback mechanism. Yeah. I don't care if it's applied kinesiology. I don't care if it's acupuncture. I don't care what frequencies or whatever you're using to identify it, but any sort of biofeedback is better than no biofeedback. And some people argue labs or biofeedback. I would argue that it is not the same.
No, yeah, I agree with you. I would agree. There's a lot of, frequency-based biofeedback machines as well. And those, I'll just touch on those really quick because I've had some people ask about them. They can be really helpful. And I think that there can be some validity to them, but I think that when you use frequency machines, I don't think they're so specific yet to be able to cut through the noise. And what I mean by that is if you have a lot of fascial imbalances, you have a lot of emotional things your body's holding on to, the scans are going to pick those up to some extent. And the scans, from what I've seen, usually aren't able to actually pinpoint the root issue because there's so much compensation, so much noise in the way. And so it can be really cool, but I don't find that sometimes it can be as helpful with things. So that's a little side piece. So, Dr. Tim, so one point here as to addressing the root cause correctly, you talk about, yeah, the labs can be helpful, but really having a biofeedback technique where we can test your body specifically because protocols are not going to match every person perfectly. And that's why people will take things and they might react to them a lot of times on these different protocols because you're actually taking something that you don't need or it's actually bad for you. And so that can create a lot of confusion and frustration. One of the things we find is it's really important to address things in order of the body's priority. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of times people might need to overall improve detoxification before they start killing infections. People might need to strengthen part of their gut health before they can ultimately really help support hormone detoxification or hormone balancing. So there's just different relationships. And one of the things that we do, which is really, really has been amazing in practice, is the technique that we do, the systems healthcare technique, and just applied kinesiology. We're able to determine what these priorities are. And so if someone comes in, a lot of times they have SIBO, they have bloating, they have bacterial imbalance in their guts. And, doc after doc after doc has just thrown herbs at it, antibiotics, all these things. But when you get in and you test, you realize it happens because the priority is there's a lot of liver congestion and poor bile flow. So the the bile is not flowing as well. And that creates an environment in the gut that allows the bacteria to build up and things like that. So addressing the priority is key. And again, biofeedback techniques are usually going to be amazing for that. The one thing that we talk about a lot is giving the right treatment. And of course, we talked about that just a bit there. Like sometimes people just have the wrong supplements. Sometimes they aren't given the right lifestyle recommendations or nutrition changes. And those things can be really tedious sometimes for people. I know there's a lot of practitioners that just say, oh, the ketogenic approach is the way to go. I don't think that's for everybody. There's some people that say the carnivore is the way to go. I think that may not be for everybody. So there's a way that seems kind of right to each person, but there's a way that doctors think like, hey, this is how you do it. And I would say at the core of it, everybody's a little bit different. And I would say the right diet is probably just honestly eating whole foods and stuff like that. So that's that. The last piece I'll kind of mention here is basically having not fully complete care or treatment can sometimes be an issue. So if you just get put on supplements, but you don't actually address nutrition, well, you're going to be limiting yourself. You're going to be working against yourself to some extent. If you just address nutrition and supplements, but you don't actually change how you live, whether it comes to stress or sleep schedule or not getting enough movement, if you don't address those things as well, then your body is going to be limited on how much that nutrition can actually benefit you and how much the supplements can actually benefit you. So having incomplete treatment is a big thing. Dr. Tim, I'm trying to hurry here. I know we got just a couple minutes here. So what else do we have on our list here as far as why functional medicine doesn't work sometimes?
Yeah. Double/triple/quadruple dipping with doctors, approaches, things like that. And I think that this point kind of piggybacks off of the making sure that you're complete with your treatment, because like you said, docs will just say, oh, your iron's low, so take iron. Well, just yesterday, I had a patient who she's in 5th grade. She's got literally her entire life, she's just been throwing up.
Oh man,
all the time. most days, to where it's just normal. She'll just go to the bathroom, throw up, and then she'll feel better and go about her day. And I saw her for her first visit, came back 2 weeks later, and she hadn't thrown up since I saw her last time.
Amazing.
And it was great. And then mom has her working with a nutritionist and a couple other things that she's got going on metabolically to make sure that, she's doing the best she can to take care of her. And she has low iron, and her nutritionist is like, she needs to be on iron. So she came in, we found that iron was provoking the microbiome. And her main reason that I think she was throwing up was she had an acetaldehyde thing affecting the gallbladder, and nausea, vomiting, all those things are usually a gallbladder symptom.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why we made such big strides so quickly. And she thankfully listened to my recommendation of, hey, we'll get back to the iron in the future, after maybe 6 weeks total of care or so. But for the time being, let's hold off. And she came in yesterday and she was like, yeah, the nutritionist said she really, really, really wants her to get back on it. Like maybe even like half a one every other day or something. And I said, no, you got to hold off for now. Like I get the nutritionist's point, but the nutritionist knows these are the nutrients that you need for your body to function, but the nutritionist doesn't know what depletes those things.
Yeah.
Nutrition knowledge, if you're just a licensed dietitian or nutritionist, has nothing to do with anything clinical and anything, conditions, infections, microbiome issues, all of those things. And if it does, they're not doing the systems healthcare technique, and they're not a trained functional medicine doctor. Whether that sounds cocky or arrogant or whatever, I don't care. But there are people that will come in that they say, okay, well, this person told me this, and I would like to do this. And I always think to myself, well, why are you coming here for help if you want to listen to other people that their training isn't as good, their experience isn't as good, all these things, and then wonder why things are not progressing properly?
Yeah.
And so, or I'll have people, they went to this other functional medicine doc, things were not getting better. They come to see me and they're like, well, my other doc said this. My other doc said this. And then my question is always, well, why did you feel the need to come see me then?
Yeah.
And that sounds, it sounds so argumentative, and I don't mean it like that, but it's always the question of like, okay, well, if you had success somewhere else, you wouldn't have had the need to go see another doctor, And so if you're looking for another approach and somebody else's expertise, sometimes you got to just listen. And I'm very thankful that, this patient's mother was like, oh yeah, we're listening to what you have to say. I was just expressing her concerns and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, well, 6 weeks without an iron supplement, she's going to be just fine, but I'll often have people that, like, this was months back, but she came in for a couple of visits and she was just obsessing over mold and these things. And like, it just takes years to get rid of it and all this. And I'm like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't take years to get rid of. You just got to do the right things.
Yeah.
And she was taking these binders and wanted to take this antifungal medication, and she brought it with her, and it was causing every muscle in her body to go hypertonic and cause some problems and everything. And I'm like, I really don't think you should do that. And she just wasn't getting the results that we wanted to. And so sometimes, probiotics are a great example. Some people say, hey, this doc told me to take a probiotic. We find it's messing with things. Well, I just recently had a lady who, she was doing great. All of her things were getting better. She had some gut issues. She had some adult acne, all those things. We were like, acne was almost completely gone. Gut was doing great. Hadn't seen her in 2 months because we thought she was doing great. And then she's like, yeah, I started taking this probiotic, and, my face is totally breaking out and all this stuff again. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes you got to just stick with the program, because the reason that we ask people to do stuff is because other things can cause problems. There's different nutrients that can feed microbiome. There's different things that can provoke problems and just cause issues at the end of the day. I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point, but it happens. I'm sure you experience that with patients quite a bit. You gotta trust that whoever you're working with, I don't even care if it's us, whoever you're working with, you have to trust their process, because the reasons they're asking you to do these things is because they have experience and they've seen things work. Our way is not just the highway. And if you go to another doc, they're going to have experience and success and all that stuff with other patients. And therefore you should listen to them completely. You can challenge them, of course, because if their stuff doesn't make sense and they can't back it up, that's one thing. But docs that are doing this should be able to back up their claims with their experience and their training and all that stuff. So stick with the program at the end of the day. But let's get into your last point here. So this is more so pointing things to the patient. Were you compliant, and were you ready to heal?
Yep. So yeah, some big questions there. And when people will say like, hey, functional medicine didn't work for me, or the holistic route didn't work, that's one of the questions I think just needs to be asked. And it might be a simple question. It might be, yes, I was compliant, I did everything perfectly and all those things, in which case, I think there's more of an issue with the overall approach from the doctor and so forth. But sometimes the patient could do a little bit better. Sometimes they could be a little bit more compliant. Sometimes they could, don't just take the supplements and then kind of eat whatever you want. Like, you need to be, all in, more or less. And then this big one here is, are you ready to heal? Like, I love that question, because I think sometimes we can self-sabotage ourselves by doing things, but in our mind, we're not necessarily there. We're not necessarily ready. And so basically just kind of like, meditating on some of those things, and really figuring out like, hey, emotionally, mentally, maybe even spiritually, like, am I ready to heal? Am I ready to let go of whatever's happening? And am I okay with that? I see a lot of people, they do the right thing again, but in their mind, and in their heart, sometimes they're holding on to something. And I think a really good component of health and being healthy is the ability to like let go. The ability to let go mentally and emotionally, I think, can be really helpful. So, Dr. Tim, anything to add to that? Otherwise, we need to go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. You have to have positive thoughts, positive energy, all of those things, and be ready. I always say, some people, I feel like it's like a subconscious self-sabotage thing, because they feel, this is a whole psychology thing, and I'm not a therapist, but this is my suspicion. Subconsciously, they feel inadequate, like they're not meeting the goals or performing like they should somewhere in life, and they need to have something as a fallback to blame, and some sort of scapegoat, and their health is one of those things. It's just a common theme that I've noticed. And so I always tell people that I think maybe on that road, I see this a lot. If you would like to get the most out of this and you truly want to heal, I would make sure that you're aware of that, and that you're doing everything you can to make sure that you can heal. And everybody's usually really, really receptive to that. So, awesome. Let's wrap things up. So
let's do it.
I am Dr. Tim Augustiniak, down here in Bentonville, Arkansas at Flourish Functional Wellness Center. If you'd like to find me online, my website is draugustiniak.com or flourishfwc.com. All the contact info and links to all the socials are on there. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions for future episodes, feel free to reach out and let us know.
Love it. Dr. Joel Miller, you can find us online at drjoelmiller.com. The practice is called Freedom, Health, and Wellness here in Flower Mound, Texas. You can find me online on Instagram. Just look up Dr. Joel Miller. If you guys have any questions, need any guidance, please feel free to reach out. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next one.